The desert night stretched wide and endless, swallowing the last colors of the setting sun until only shadows and stars remained. The horizon glowed faintly with the fading trace of fire, and above it, the first stars began to scatter like silver dust across a black canvas. The air was sharp and cold, slipping through her worn coat, carrying with it the scent of sand and distance. She had walked farther than her strength allowed, each step heavier than the last, until finally, her weary eyes caught the glow of a lantern swaying gently against the wind. She stopped at the edge of a weathered porch. The cabin before her stood with a stubborn kind of pride, its wood darkened by age, its walls whispering the stories of storms it had endured. And leaning against the rail, framed by the lantern's glow, was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, dust clinging to his boots and hat tilted low over steady eyes that seemed carved from the desert itself. He didn't move, didn't flinch at the sight of a stranger. He simply watched her, silent, the air between them thick with an unspoken recognition. When he spoke, his voice was low, roughened like gravel beneath wagon wheels, yet calm enough to still her trembling heart. "You can sleep on the porch, or in my bed." The word struck her like a bolt of lightning through her tired body. She froze, her mind racing with all the reasons she should turn and keep walking. She had learned not to trust men, not to trust promises that came too easily. Yet his tone carried no hunger, no mockery. It was not an invitation wrapped in sin but an offering of shelter, of safety, perhaps even dignity. His eyes, steel gray yet strangely warm, held her there longer than she intended. Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked away, fighting the war inside herself. The porch was cold, exposed, another night of restless shivering. But his bed, his arms, that was risk, temptation, and something far more dangerous than fear, hope. She drew in a breath that trembled with exhaustion. "I'm tired," she whispered, her voice breaking in the night air. Maybe I need the warmth of arms instead of wood beneath me." He said nothing more, only turned and pushed open the door. A soft golden glow spilled out, carrying with it the crackle of a fire and the scent of smoke and pine. She hesitated one heartbeat longer, then stepped inside. The cabin was simple, yet it felt alive. The fire in the hearth painted shadows across the walls, and the silence inside was different from the silence outside. It was gentler, filled with promise. She lowered herself onto the chair by the fire, her body aching as though it had been carrying weight for a lifetime. The cowboy removed his hat, placed it on the table, and without a word set about pouring water into a tin cup, sliding it across to her. She lifted it with trembling hands, and for the first time in years, warmth spread through her chest. Outside, the desert wind howled and whispered secrets through the sand, but within those walls there was stillness. Two strangers, bound by nothing but the chance of one meeting, sat across from each other in silence. Yet that silence was not empty, it was heavy, alive, a fragile thread connecting their broken pieces. She closed her eyes, letting her head rest against the wooden chair, and thought, maybe tonight, I can breathe again. And as the firelight danced between them, she knew in some unspoken way that this man, this cowboy, was not just a stranger. He was the beginning of something she had not dared to imagine. Not salvation, not love, not yet. But something far simpler, far rarer. Safety. That night, she didn't sleep on the porch. She chose the one place the world had never given her before, the safety of his arms. Morning crept gently into the cabin, spilling light across the wooden floorboards and warming the ashes of the dying fire. She stirred from restless dreams, her body stiff but her spirit strangely light. For the first time in years, she had slept without waking in fear at every sound. She blinked, adjusting to the sunlight that filtered through the cracks of the shutters, and found him standing by the window, hat in hand, watching the horizon with the stillness of a man who had learned to listen to the land. He turned when he felt her gaze, and for a brief moment, she saw something flicker in his eyes, relief, perhaps, or a quiet vow unspoken. "Coffee's on the stove," he said simply, his voice steady as stone. She rose slowly, her legs trembling, and poured herself a cup, letting the bitter warmth chase the chill from her bones. But peace in the desert was never built to last. By midday, the sound of hooves shattered the fragile stillness. Dust rose beyond the ridge, curling like smoke, and her heart froze in her chest. She knew those riders. Men who carried shadows in their eyes and cruelty in their laughter. They were the reason she had run so far, the reason her feet bled and her soul ached. Her breath quickened. Panic clawed at her throat. "They've found me," she whispered, her voice breaking. She looked at him, fear spilling from her eyes. "You don't understand, they'll kill you if you stand in their way." The cowboy didn't move. He set his hat on his head, buckled his gun belt tight, and finally turned to face her. His words were calm, yet heavy as a vow etched in stone. "As long as I draw a breath, no man lays a hand on you." She wanted to protest, wanted to beg him not to fight battles that weren't his. But the strength in his eyes silenced her. He was not a man who made promises lightly. The riders drew closer, their laughter sharp, their spurs jingling as they pulled up outside the cabin. Dust swirled in the air as boots hit the ground. A fist slammed against the door. "Send her out," a voice barked, rough and cruel. "Or we'll burn this shack with both of you inside." Her heart thundered. She pressed back against the wall, her nails digging into the wood. But before fear could consume her, he stepped forward, his shadow falling across her like a shield. He opened the door slowly, his stance calm, steady. The sunlight carved his figure into something larger than life, a man who would not bend, not break. "Morning, boys," he drawled, his voice a steady hum of steel. "You're trespassing." The leader spat on the ground, sneering. "You think you can stop us, cowboy? She's ours. Always was." The cowboy's hand hovered near his holster, not rushing, not trembling. Not anymore. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Then, in a heartbeat, everything erupted. The crack of gunfire tore through the stillness, shattering the fragile peace of the morning. Dust exploded, bullets splintered wood, and the air filled with the chaos of violence. She dropped to the floor, hands over her head, her body shaking. But through the storm of sound, she heard him, steady, unyielding, each shot fired with precision, each movement filled with purpose. The fight seemed endless, yet she realized with awe and terror that he was not fighting for pride or glory. He was fighting for her. At last, the gunfire faded, leaving only the ragged sound of breathing and the acrid sting of gun smoke. When she dared to lift her head, the riders were gone, their bodies and horses retreating into the distance, broken by the will of one man who refused to let them win. The cowboy stood in the doorway, chest heaving, dust and sweat clinging to him, yet his eyes were calm. He turned back to her, his voice softer now, though it carried the same weight as before. "It's over. You're safe. Safe." The word broke her. Tears spilled down her face, hot and unstoppable. She pushed herself up and stumbled toward him, her body shaking with relief and exhaustion. When she reached him, she didn't hesitate. She threw herself into his arms, pressing her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of dust, leather, and smoke. And in that moment, she knew. Safety wasn't in walls or distance. Safety was in him, in the arms that had held back the world, in the vow he had made without hesitation. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "If this is a dream, I don't ever want to wake." He held her tighter, his chin brushing against her hair. "It's no dream," he said softly. "This is our beginning." The desert stretched wide beyond them, endless and untamed, but within his arms, she finally felt what she had searched for across 1,000 weary miles, peace. That if this story touched your heart, if you felt the fire, the fear, and the comfort of finding safety in unlikely places, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. More stories await, each one carrying you into a world where love is wilder than the West and stronger than fear.